checking there's anything else behind me.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Welcome back to FOMO Live of our book club. And I'm here with Jem somewhere. Oh, I've learnt to point the right direction. And Jack is down there. And we're going to be talking all about The Dance Tree.
Like remember my copy.
I actually have a physical copy this time. It's very exciting.
We've all got matching.
But I've got the sprayed edges. Have you got sprayed edges?
Oh.
No, you got the special one.
Lovely.
I've got though. Where is it? No, I haven't. I thought I had a signed one, but I don't.
I've
got a signed one. You do. There you go.
Oh.
From a little free library.
Jem?
From a little free library.
Oh, mate.
Is the edges bees?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Bees, perfect. Oh, I love
That's
it.
so
what a
good.
thing.
Right, and we've got some people have arrived.
Oh, hello.
Kat in. Hi, Kat.
Hi, Kat.
And we've got Zach in. Hi, Zach.
Oh, hi, Zach.
Hi, Zach.
And yeah, so we've managed to just about finish the book in time. Oh, I say that for me because I finished it.
I think I was the last one, though. I think I was the last one to finish.
I think only by a day, though. So
we all finished it this week, though, didn't we?
To be fair, though, when we finish the book super early, you forget like about what to say, like what you've read, and when you're having to talk in depth about it, you have to kind of remind yourself of stuff. So it's quite fresh, which is good.
Yeah. Hopefully,
that's my excuse anyway.
Hopefully, I've retained it for the last day or so. So we've also got Paris, Texas. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
And yeah, so I'm sure more people will be dropping in. We had quite a few people on the Discord were reading it and said they thought it would be an interesting discussion when they finished it. So do add your comments in the comments if you want to say something about The Dance Tree or ask us any questions, give us any discussion points. Please do. Because yeah, I think we are all I don't know. I just felt very different about this to how I felt about the other FOMO books so far.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on it. It's kind of like the others I completely like was just yes. Yeah. So we've had like how many have we done now? This is the fourth one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first three books I absolutely loved all of them. And this one I enjoyed it. I can't say I loved it.
No.
So yeah, let's have some general thoughts. So we were reading this over May and June, so some people might have read it a bit longer ago than us. But yeah, I just don't think that this was what I expected. Not in a bad way necessarily. I did enjoy it, but I don't think it was what I was expecting it to be at all.
Agree.
What about you, Jem?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it was poorly synopsized, actually. I think it was very much about a woman and her difficulty with having children and the strain that put on her life, and really that was the story. It didn't really have a lot to do with this dance mania, which is what it's sort of billed as, and the title sort of alludes to that. Though now that I've read it, obviously we know what the Dance Tree is. It's not really to do with the dancing at all. But I just I had some fundamental issues with decisions that the main character made, particularly towards the end of the book, that I felt were out of character and overly dramatized.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you made a good point about that, Alice, when you were talking about it a little bit, Jem, and Alice, you said, I felt that was kind of like the mania has almost taken her a little bit in some ways, because her behaviour.
That's what I wondered.
Changed quite drastically, and I thought that was actually quite a good point, because I think I agree with you, Gemma. She was acting out of character from the way she'd started, but I suppose that was her kind of developmental, or the change in her brought on, because it's like there's not just the dancing mania. There's like there's a massive heat wave, isn't there?
Yeah.
And there's a famine, and there's all sorts of like really intense social phenomena going on, and she's heavily pregnant. And
I was going to say, and in her own personal life, there's also a lot going on, a lot of pressures. The pregnancy and the, like, obviously the drama with the bees and the farm and the what's going on with that, plus the mania and the heat wave. It's all like sort of combining to me to like put this sort of weird kind of pressure on her, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, and like you say, Jack, I think when because we did discuss this briefly in WhatsApp earlier this week, and I think when Alice said that did sort of make sense to me, but I still felt it was too dramatic given the tone of the rest of the novel. So it was quite a slow burn, very poetic writing all the way through, but then it reached the end and it just went whoosh, and I just felt like it was out of
very kind of, because it's quite a short book, isn't it? I mean, I really like her as an author. Like, this is why I pre-ordered this, because I read her first book for adults was The Mercies. And I loved it. I loved The Mercies. Like, if you liked the writing style in The Dance Tree, The Mercies is equally as devastating emotionally.
Right.
And it's also based on historical event, which was this witch trials in Norway for these women. All their husbands, they live on like an island, and their husbands are all fishermen, and their husbands are all killed in this storm. And so these women are left to fend for themselves. And because they actually managed to fend for themselves, there's suddenly this, you've called down the storm, you're all witches, how are you surviving without these men, blah, 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 blah. And there's these horrific witch trials that took place, and these poor women were, killed and basically murdered. And yeah, she wrote about that, and very similar in some ways to a lot of the themes in here. Like, there's her themes are really strongly like sisterhood, female friendships, and yeah, like there's quite a lot of similar themes in The Dance Tree as there were in The Mercies. But I felt The Mercies was very much what I thought it was going to be, because I read it was about this event, and it was about this event. Whereas The Dance Tree, I've enjoyed it a lot. I love her writing. Like you say, Gemma, I think her writing is beautiful. I think she's a really, like, because the first books that I read were the children's books, and I think she's one of the most beautiful writers for children. Like, her writing's stunning. But I expected it to be more around the event, and the event is just background to Lisbeth's story. And whilst I found Lisbeth's story interesting, I wanted Netta's story. I thought she was far more like her story. I wanted her story. I felt compelled to want another character's story more than the main character. And I think I didn't warm to Lisbeth as a character, and I'm not sure why. But yeah.
I really enjoyed the return of Agnetha or Netha or whoever. That was really, to me, there was a mystery there. I really enjoyed that. Before we knew why was she sent away, and we were a bit in the dark like Lisbeth. I thought that was it was definitely for me the interesting storyline of the book as well. I was like, this is very mysterious. Like, why was she sent away? What's going on? And I thought she and the other character involved in that mystery, I guess you'd say, Ida, was she called?
Ida,
I thought they were both really interesting characters. And as you say, you had the sisterhood element and the female friendship element. And I should say, before we go any further, there will be spoilers in it. Huge spoilers for the rest of the show. So if you've not read it or you're finishing it, probably don't listen to the rest of our discussion until you have read it. But yeah, absolutely spoilers ahead. But to come back as well, Jem, to what you said, I think that I was saying to my friend the other day, actually, because she'd read it for FOMO as well. When this was when I'd only read 3 chapters, I was like, I get the impression it's one of those books I've read lately where the blurb is just not leading me to expect what the book is actually about. I think I really did think it was going to be about that event, as you say, and it just, as we've said, that is more the backdrop to this one woman's storyline. So yeah, should we see what some other people said?
Yeah.
Kat enjoyed the book, which was well written, but it was hard to read because of the subject matter, very heartbreaking.
Actually, I'd say that's the one thing I'd say, that it was so much about like miscarriages and child loss and infertility and fertility issues. She's not infertile, but she's having trouble carrying a child to term. So she's had all these miscarriages. And that's very semi-autobiographical because the author has struggled with that until she had her baby last year. And so you could see she's poured a lot of herself into this story and wanted to represent this experience. But I think it should have been in the blurb because I think it's very triggering for a lot of people. That would be very, very triggering, which I'm surprised it's not in there because it is such a triggering thing. And the author herself has been through it. So I felt it was kind of like, I'm shocked that it's such a huge part of the story and it's not been mentioned. Because even just to briefly say it, that this is her 12th child she's tried to bring to term or something, do you know what I mean? Just something brief to say, you know.
And I do think that was like a very heartbreaking storyline throughout, and I did feel for the character, but I kind of felt for her more when I read the author's note at the end, and I like knowing like what I had seen and heard from the author. I did already know the author's kind of background. I think a lot of people would go into this and read it and then maybe either not even read the author's note at the end or read the author's note at the end and realize this is very drawn from personal experience. I think she says in it, like, I wanted there to be like a representation of that out in the world, or something like that. And it hit me harder reading the author's note than it did in the book. Like, it was very, very sad in the book, but it was kind of her past, and there was a lot of focus on her grief, but it was sort of part of the story as opposed to the whole story, wasn't it? So I think she'd done a really, really good job, if that was what she had set out to do, to represent that issue. That I've never personally read a book that really, I think, represented like pregnancy loss quite so much. So it was indeed very heartbreaking in that sense, and like, I think a good representation of that, but at the same time, that, as you said, wasn't the story that I was expecting.
And that's not that it's like it's not criticism of the book.
No,
I just think it's just like and I think it's just like, I was surprised it wasn't made like just a mention of it briefly, because I think it would be a lot of people, it would be a bit too close to home for a lot of people, I think.
I agree.
I
think that what you said, Alice, about, you know, bringing representation, because it's still quite a taboo subject now, isn't it? Miscarriage. People don't really talk about it.
Interestingly, she was really open on her Instagram, and she shared a lot about it. And she even put out a call out for women who don't have children to tell her their personal stories by instant messenger. And and it was interesting. I had a few interactions with her through that, actually. She's a really thoughtful kind of, it's like she's trying to like explore all these avenues of this subject, because it is taboo. It's like she wanted to know stories of women who couldn't have children, who tried and couldn't, or women who didn't, or women who made the choice not to. She was like, we don't talk about it enough. It's like it's never something that women feel they're allowed to talk about, or they could talk about, because unless you want to be a mother, it's kind of like not the normal pathway, is it really? It's kind of, and so she's been quite like vocal in opening up this conversation from a few perspectives, actually.
Don't you think as well, in that sense, it's interesting that is the one thing that was massive in the book, huge plot thread, like the key aspect of the main character's life, and it's not in the blurb? Like, is that a sign of it being that big taboo, and the fact that we don't talk about it? Like, has whoever blurbed it gone? I'm just really surprised that it's been blurbed the way it has, and she hasn't said, like, you haven't mentioned the main thing in the story.
the main thrust. Yeah.
Also, like, I find this, you know, I don't know if you guys have had this in recent years where and this book hasn't been, I wouldn't say this book is it's not a disappointment for me, but it's not what I expected. But I've had it in the past where I've read a blurb and I've read the book and it's just not what I thought it was going to be, and then I've just been massively disappointed. And it's not the fault of the book; it's the fault of the marketing of the book. It's not the case with this, because I don't feel like I'm not disappointed with this book. I just didn't like love it the way I thought I was going to love it, and I'm trying to sort of be nice tonight to try and unpick that a little bit with you guys.
I think I feel like I've been noticing that more lately. Like, I think quite a few books, some of the books, in fact, that we read for the Women's Prize long list, definitely had a blurb that led me to believe one thing about it, and then that thing was in the background, the same as this. I think in that sense, it very much reminded me of Cursed Bread, which was set around like a real event, and again, sort of mass hysteria. So similar in that way, but that was totally the background of the book. That wasn't at all the foreground, the main story. So until the very end. So I do agree that I've been noticing that.
It almost makes you wonder if the people writing the blurbs have read the book properly.
This is what I said to my friend the other day. I wonder if they've actually read it in its entirety.
Yeah,
I think it's just marketing, isn't it, as well? A lot of it, I think it's marketing. I think they're just trying to sell, and they're probably thinking maybe that's not something that, like you say, it's a taboo subject still. It's something that might be triggering or whatever, upsetting, but rather than put it in there, they've just gone, oh, let's just it's not.
I think it's interesting that they've mentioned in the blurb that she is pregnant, but they've not said like anything about like her tragedy.
Like you say, all it would have taken was to say something like Elizabeth is experiencing her 12th pregnancy, and you can then draw whatever you want from that. You don't have to go into how much of a big topic it is in the book, but I think it should have been mentioned.
Agreed.
So I'm sure we will unpick all of this some more, but Zach mentioning, have we read any other Kiran Millwood Hargrave? I think, Jack, you've read lots. I've only read one of her children's books, which was Julia and the Shark, which I think is really brilliant.
Yeah, she's really like her writer. So I'm generally not one who's like I don't go for. I like beautiful writing. I can appreciate it, but I generally don't. Not it's not my be all and end all. But she's an author who I know her writing is beautiful, and I like it, and I enjoy it, and I can savor it, like her turns of phrase and just the way she paints a picture. I think she's just so talented. And to start off as a children's author, and this is the thing about like I love about a really good middle grade or really good children's books, where you read a really excellent middle grade book and the writing is just so beautiful. You're like, this is this is a talented person. So she's got some wonderful children's books as well, and young adult books. And I've not read every single one, but I've got the last few that I haven't read on my TBR, and I kind of want to do an author spotlight on her, because I think she's not well enough. Like, she was like a Waterstones Children's Book of the Year winner. I think the first Waterstones Children's Book of the Year winner. And she's like very highly regarded, but you just don't see her books out there enough, I don't think. And The Mercies, I think, was shockingly under promoted or underread, because I think The Mercies was like, I finished that book and I couldn't breathe. It was so like, it was like a gut punch. It was so emotional. Like I really enjoyed that book, and I was just so shocked that it didn't. I think it got what's the prize is it a Jalak prize? I think it was shortlisted. Is it a Jalak prize? You follow that prize, Gemma? Is it Jalak?
The Jalak, yeah.
Jalak prize. Yeah, she got shortlisted. I think it was longlisted for the Jalak prize.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. I think it was The Mercies. I might be wrong about that. I'll have a little look. But yeah, I think she needs to be, I think, read more. I do. I think that.
Had you read others, Gem, or was this your first?
No, I've got the Mercies on my shelf, along with the other 100, 200 books. And I wouldn't not pick her up based on this one, even though I didn't love it. I did enjoy the writing style, and I think some of the things that we've already mentioned, particularly Neath. Nefe, I don't know how to pronounce her name, and Ida were really strong characters, and the baddie bloke, what was his name?
Plater, was he called? Plater.
Yeah, he was really well done.
And
I think she covered some of the stuff, like all the bee stuff, I thought was really, really good and interesting. I don't know whether that's just my agricultural background, but I thought it was really
fascinating. Yeah.
So I'll definitely pick her up again. It really was just when you reach a point in a book where a character makes a decision and you're just not on board anymore.
Then you kind of check out a little bit, don't you?
Yeah. So it was probably like 3.5, 4 star to me up until that point, and then I was just like, no.
No.
Okay.
So she was longlisted for the Jalak in 2021 with the Mercies.
So Zach really enjoyed the Mercies, and Kat was saying that the return of Agnetha added more pressure to the situation. Kat also thought the dance tree was where the women danced. I do think that there is, like, definitely in the marketing, they have led you to believe it's about the dancing.
I would have liked more about the dance tree. I don't know if anyone else felt like that. It was sort of mentioned as it's this like pagan thing that her mother sort of was involved in, but we never really got to like the root of that.
No.
And I would have liked more from that.
Yeah. So Paris, Texas saying, I didn't read the blurb, so I didn't have a lot of expectations. Felt a bit meh about it. Liked the writing and I was intrigued in the beginning, but I felt she tried to do too much.
It's possible. There were quite a lot of lines of storylines weaved in together, weren't there? Maybe.
There was, yeah. And Kat saying that the book had a melancholy tone coupled with the dreadful treatment of women and the bleak undercurrent running through the story made it difficult to read at times, heavy at times. Yeah, I'd agree. I think it was... I feel like
I would say don't read the Mercies then, Kat. Yeah.
I feel like it was a book that kind of demanded to be read quite slowly.
Yes. I would agree.
It's that sort of writing style where like the style is so rich and interesting and like just beautiful writing that I really did appreciate. But that makes me read things a lot slower, I think. And I thought it sort of had a relatively steady pace rather than up until, as you say, Jem, at the end it was a bit like boom, boom, boom.
I think because we read Hamnet together last year, wasn't it? Hamnet, and in the beginning, the very first few chapters, particularly where she's kind of got the first chapter or 2 chapters, there's this relationship with the bees and this kind of almost magical kind of thing about her, and it really reminded me of Hamnet and Shakespeare's wife. What was her name? Agnes. And it reminded me of her because she was very like in tune with nature and bees. Funny enough, I think there were there bees in Hamnet when she went to her brother's place. Didn't he have?
Can't remember, but there was definitely all herbs and different things like that, wasn't there?
Yeah, so it kind of gave me a little bit of those vibes. And again, it's with that writing, the sort of beautiful kind of lyrical writing. So when it first started, I was like, oh, this is giving me Hamnet vibes to start with, like this character of this strong woman who's kind of like, she's kind of got this almost magical affinity with these bees, which, it was interesting. Yeah, that you say it's like that slow pace, because that's how we felt when we were reading Hamnet, isn't it? It's that kind of writing to savor. You don't read it fast, you just...
Yes, I definitely agree.
So did you have any favorite moments to this book? I'm going to put that as the next. Oh, or not?
Yes, I did. I think my favorite moment was when the bees were potentially going to swarm.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well, actually.
Oh, wait! I thought that was such a beautifully written scene. Like, you could really picture it in your mind, and the way, like, her calmness sort of, lulled the bees back. I just thought that was a beautifully written scene.
Yeah, love that too.
Your favourite moment.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed that too. I think she's trying to tell them to be quiet, stop shouting. You know?
Yeah.
And then he plays his lute. Is it a lute he has?
Yes, that's right.
And I felt the scene between her and, is it Erin, when they kind of admit their feelings for each other, when they kind of have their talk and they get to know each other. Or is it the first scene when they get to know each other? They don't admit their feelings. They first go walking in the forest together and they talk, and he shares about his wife and that kind of thing. I thought it was really nice. I enjoyed those scenes between the pair of them. I thought they were good.
I thought the bit with the bees really gave her a chance to show that she was more than what people viewed her as. I feel like she felt like at times quite a not downtrodden character, but she her mother-in-law wasn't particularly supportive of her, was she? And you got the impression that the husband wasn't especially supportive and was whether it was coming from him or not, she had this sense of his palpable disappointment about the loss of the children and the babies, which quite naturally. But the bees thing really showed everybody that she had more to her than that that was not her entire personality. It showed her as a really capable, strong woman, didn't it, who was able to avert something that nobody else probably could have averted in that situation and in that farm. Nobody else really knew what to do. So I thought that was an interesting moment for her character and for I think me liking the character. Actually, I thought she was a better character for that moment.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, it gives her a bit more depth, didn't it? And not that she didn't lack depth. I'm not saying that, but I think it gave like you say, it gave her this identity beyond being this downtrodden wife who's also feels like she's let everything down. She's not performing her duty. It's not that she doesn't just want a child for duty's sake. She wants a child because she wants to be a mother, but also there's this whole expectation that if you are a wife, you are going to produce children, and she hasn't. So and her mother-in-law keeps throwing that in her face, doesn't she? Well, you're not a mother, you wouldn't understand. And she's like, but I am a mother. I'm a mother 12 times over.
Yeah.
But just which
and
was really a heartbreaking line. I felt that really stuck with me.
And I really liked on a similar sort of basis. I like the developing friendship and sisterhood between her and Netha, whatever we call her now. I thought the ending for me, I really liked how they had fallen into a relationship of trust and were pulling each other through what each other had gone through in the book. So I kind of like that as well. But yeah, I thought we'd come on to maybe the characters. Speaking of Lisbeth herself. So yeah, I think Jem, you probably liked her the least. Or you didn't like her decisions.
No, I did not. I just felt like, and I don't know, maybe this is unfair of me because I haven't been in her situation. So this is just from my perspective. If you'd lost 11 babies and you were 9 months pregnant, would you take the risk of going into the forest unaccompanied, getting up on a stage full of manic dancers on your own, running into fires? I just don't understand why someone who's 9 months pregnant, having all that loss behind them, would risk that child in any way. I just that didn't make sense in my mind. And maybe that's unfair. I'm happy to be challenged. But it made me really angry.
See,
it made me really angry.
I'm not actually challenging you. I completely see that point. And it definitely could have gone that way for me. But as I was reading it, I personally was like, I wasn't okay with every decision that she made. Particularly, I don't know, we'll maybe come on to that in a minute, but it was one of those books where I didn't really know how I felt about it. And I think, as maybe you said, Jack, I think some of that was coming from the fact that Lisbeth wasn't the most interesting character in it for me. But she was like who the story was revolving around. But I was enjoying more from the other peripheral characters.
Yeah, and you're just wanting to find out more about them.
Yeah.
All of them, actually. And I felt like Erin and Frederick, they were really, really likable. I really liked them. Like, I really wanted to know more about them. Netta was really fascinating as a character, and like really like there was something like clearly wanted to know what her penance was, all this. I kind of figured it out a little bit before we found out what it was. I don't know if anyone else did, but then I think it's because I've read some of her work before. Like I said, I think there's, you know, she's got similar themes in her books, and she when it was kind of revealed, the big reveal that they'd been together, but those two, and it the background to it I wouldn't have guessed, but the fact that these two women have been together was like, for me, that's the story I wanted to read about. I wanted to read about what had happened to them, how they were coming through it, how they'd even spoken and got back together after everything, and how they were going. You know, I was like hooked on their story a little bit, their love story. But yeah.
They were both like badass characters as well.
They were really cool.
Yeah, and I think Lisbeth wasn't initially. She's kind of she gets this kind of like, she starts doing this stuff, which actually for you, Gemma, was kind of like really reckless. But I think what she starts to do is she starts to be a bit defiant in the face of all of this criticism from her husband, from her mother-in-law. She's obviously feeling like no one really cares or loves for her, like because of, you know, her own mother, and the issues there as well, her own mother passing as well, her own mother dying. And I couldn't figure out if her mother had killed herself. I couldn't figure that one out. If her mother had died by suicide, basically. I couldn't figure that one out. I think that's what I took from it. But there was this whole mental health thing as well that was brought into it through what's gone on with her mother and her mother's mania. But yeah, there were this whole thing about Lisbeth. She seemed to me like, when you say she started doing this stuff, she started just being really defiant of a lot of things. Like, she started being defiant with her mother-in-law, with Plata, whatever his name was, that guy. Even down to the point where she said to like Erin at one point, when he says, "Oh, don't go into the forest on your own at night because it's dangerous." She's like, "Oh, don't tell me what to do." She starts getting like really, I think she's just had enough of people telling her what to do. And, you know, I think her husband even has been trying to dictate how she manages her pregnancies and stuff as well, up until that point. So yeah, you can kind of almost see this, it's kind of like snap. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just going against everybody at this point. But yeah, I kind of think that's what's happened with her. But she did make some crazy decisions in terms of like what she was doing safety wise. Honestly, and when she ran off into the woods and she found those starving people that were in there and they were going to kill the dog and everything, I just was like, yeah, that's happened to you. But yet he tells you again, don't go into the woods on your own. You're still going, I'll do what I want.
I did definitely get that from it as well, that it was this idea of like, she's completely rebelling against everything that society is putting on her. Like everything her mother-in-law is putting on her, her husband's putting on her. And did I think they were good decisions? No. But I think that was why she was making them.
Yeah, that's what I think.
But I do agree that it was not very sensible to make those decisions at the risk of like a pregnancy that you really, really want, that is 9 months down the line.
And I agree with all of those points, and I can see that. And in a way, I don't begrudge her having her independence, but I just felt like it was unrealistic for a woman who had experienced that level of loss to go to that much risk. If it had been her first pregnancy, then I wouldn't have had an issue with it at all, I don't think. But it was the fact that she'd had all this loss stacked up, and Hargrave had built that in us and would felt that loss, and then she still just flew in the face of it. It just that was the point that got me.
A bit contradictory.
I almost wondered if she like somehow just did not believe that she would have.
She didn't at points though, did she? She really did, because at one point it even says it's this point she starts to believe this baby might actually come along, because up until that point it's almost like she hasn't believed it.
I feel like she was in this complete sense of like denial and disbelief, or that's what I was reading from it, that it would actually happen. So like probably wasn't even thinking that these were stupid decisions, but who knows? Who knows? She was an interesting character, and definitely a very complicated character.
Yeah, definitely.
But I can completely see not loving her. Not thinking she was like, I didn't think she was like my favorite character, even in the book. Like in the book, I liked a lot of the other characters more.
Agreed.
I cannot remember where I was up to in the comments, I'm afraid.
Oh wait.
So yes, I really did like this.
That was a good device, wasn't it? That was like a good. I like their stories. Their stories were fascinating. This is what shows you she's a really good writer, because I found all of those individual stories really fascinating. These women, the dancing women.
And I liked how that was interspersed like under the headings of how many women were dancing at that point. It's like,
I thought that was a nice touch.
Like one person dancing, and then you got that person's her story and why she'd gone and done it. And then as they kind of mounted up, I thought it was nice to see that like little personal glimpse into like different people's reasons for doing it, because it was like none of those people particularly seemed like they were in an actual mania, except maybe like the first one. They were they all had their grief and their reasons for going up there and joining in with it.
I thought that was well done, and I liked the way that obviously towards the end one of those chapters was from Neith's point of view.
Yes, we did have one from Neith.
I thought that was well executed.
Very well, yeah, I like that. And Kat hates to admit, but plagiarising horribly was a favourite moment.
Admit that, fine, Kat. We all feel the same. That was pretty sweet. Yeah. Quite satisfying, actually.
It was.
To say the ending.
He was a jerk.
I think that was one of my most satisfying things about the ending, was that she did kill him.
Yeah.
Well done. And also I liked the involvement of the bees in that bit as well, although it was sad. So Zach felt the bees could have been incorporated a bit better, dancing, the church stealing and ruining everything, and them assuming the leader was the king. Yeah.
That last bit. Did you notice they called it the king bee?
Yeah.
Yes.
I wondered if that was because at the time they didn't realise it was a queen bee. I'm just a historical detail.
Yeah, I assume that's the case, because you couldn't possibly have a queen.
No, of course. That big, huge bee's got to be a male, surely.
Yeah, no, I picked that up. I think that was clever.
That was a nice touch, like a nice historical detail there, I felt.
Yeah, that's good.
Ending was wonderful. Yeah, I liked the ending. I liked it. The ending.
Yeah.
I thought was really satisfying, like with them, and like you said, them coming together and being able to talk about Ida, like, and she's able to talk about, like, they're able to have these discussions and like really open up to each other and be close. And I just, I thought it was lovely, that ending.
I like that. Yeah.
Sad that she didn't get to go off with your man though, but at the same time, But realistically, that would
never have happened. So it was a more realistic ending. But I did want her to get off with him.
Yes.
So We have mentioned a lot of the other characters that we liked and didn't like, but just anything else I suppose you wanted to mention about Neith and Ida, or the musicians, or the rest of the wider cast?
I think Ida's character arc was really interesting. She was sort of billed to us at the beginning as this sort of sweet, like friend with all the children and the happy life. Her husband was a bit of a jerk, but you know, whatever. And you really saw how strong she was as it went through the book. The fact that she'd put up with this horrid marriage for all of these years, being in love with someone else, and all of this right up until the end. And I thought it was really sad.
That also, that the fact that because she'd had the opium, like to save her from this awful drowning, like to be experiencing it, and then she could have been saved, but that's what killed her, really, isn't it?
I thought that was so tragic.
Yeah, really tragic twist, sort of.
When they introduced that like envelope of poppy, I was like, like something should still come along and save you. Don't take the poppy. But alas,
yeah,
she did. Sad. But yeah, the other character who I thought Erin was not much developed was the husband.
Yes, Henry. He was quite. Yeah, there wasn't a lot, because he was quite heavily involved in the whole original story between. Because he was supposed to marry Ida.
Yeah.
Right? Was the story. So you just wonder if they all grew up together, and Ida's husband was supposed to marry Netta, and her brother was supposed to marry Ida. And so how did it come about that he ends up marrying Ida? Like, I just, and is it just because he has this power and he wants to punish her? And why she still doesn't marry? I suppose it's because she can't, because his sister's living in the house. She can't marry him. Like, I just kind of wanted to know more about that story. And like you say, that he then felt a bit less well fleshed out. I think because I just didn't. Yeah.
I got the impression that it was Plate, whatever his name was, married Ida instead to spite. To punish Ida and to spite Netta, and also because I imagine he couldn't then bring Ida into his house if his sister is. But she wasn't there anyway, was she?
But she would be back. But it's like she's coming back, isn't she? She did come back. So it's this kind of like, well, she can't have her in the family. We can't have this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the main thing from that whole backstory that Lisbeth seemed to take from it was that she no longer liked her husband, if she ever had at the beginning of the book. She really lost all respect for him on realizing that he'd basically watched Plater kick his sister nearly to death, which is a terrible, terrible thing, obviously. Right, just he didn't have a very strong character, did he? He didn't stand up to anybody.
No.
But yeah. So, and again, we talked about it, but the dancing. What did we think of the mania and the dancing, and was it as important as we thought it was going to be? Because it did become important.
Did it though? Did it really? If the dancing wasn't in there and that was replaced with more backstory on Ida and Netta, would it have been a better book? Yes.
But would we have got the same outcome for Ida and Netta? And would also, I don't know, her musician wouldn't have come if it wasn't for the dancing.
He could have just been coming to a festival. I don't know. It felt superfluous to the plot for me.
I think it provided a lot of this social context for this time, I think. But I agree with you, Gemma. Actually, it's really hard to think about how essential it is to the story. Yeah. Really, the central story isn't the dancing. So it's like this background, but I do think it provides an interesting background, and I think it provides a lot of social context, because there is, you know, the mania, what caused it. And I think the author's note at the end, where she talks about how people have tried to, over the years, like put forward theories about this phenomena, this like it happens quite a lot. Like there was what was the book? It was on they made a thing of it recently, where there was like an adaptation, and it's a similar thing where there's like a mania where like it was like a fainting sickness or I can't even remember what it was, but like, there's always these like group social things that can happen sometimes, and like the dancing, I just thought it provided a really interesting background into kind of what was going on religiously, what was going on socially and economically, and all of these things. And I think it did allow those stories in between were so fascinating. But I agree with you, like in terms of the central storyline, I can see what you mean, but I think it provides a really good, interesting background and context to it. But I wanted more about it as well. I'm like, why were they all dancing, and did this happen elsewhere, and what else was going on? It's kind of piqued my interest in the history behind it as well a little bit.
And Ariane says here, could the dancing really say more about the views of women at the time?
Because there was a lot in there, wasn't there, when they were talking about various women, and also Lisbeth's mother, it had ended up being one of them, where they talk about and you know, women in mental health, and particularly like historically how women have been treated because they're perceived to be hysterical or mad or whatever, and the horrific things her mother, when you read the treatment that happened with her mother, because her mother had like a breakdown essentially, or some sort of psychosis, and then the treatment that they gave her for it sounded like the most horrific torture, which just will not make you better, it's going to make you worse. And then these women that were in the first woman who was dancing as well, and the way that these women were then forced to keep dancing because it was felt they must be under a religious it must be a religious mania. So then they're forcing these women to dance, and it was just this whole, and then the women who felt they would do it and they could earn money from it because they're so poor, you know, and it said it did bring up a lot, I think, of social context for these women and their backgrounds and the way women were treated and stuff, I think. Exactly, this is a good point, Kat. I think
I do agree. I think it goes back to, I think it was Zach who said earlier that she tried to do too much in the book, and I think that's what it was. I think that avenue was interesting, but I don't feel like she really explored it properly within the main narrative. It was I mean, obviously there was the thing around religion and the bees, and there was that bit as well, but it just felt a lot of bits of pieces that didn't quite come together cohesively for me.
No, I can see that, and I think was Zach's point, like you're saying, and Zach's point earlier. I think there were so many strands to this. It's just like a little bit messy at points for it, I suppose.
Makes it a good book club book because there's lots
a lot to talk about.
Kat's saying as well that if a woman stepped out of line, they must be possessed or a witch, so then they were treated terribly or killed.
Or later on they were mad and sent off to live in, you know, an asylum or whatever, you know. It's like this,
or a nunnery to be tortured and Neith was.
I think going back to, I think I missed a couple of comments that were more about Lisbeth and the other things we talked about. So I like Lisbeth. She felt cursed with the comet coming at her birth and the tragic loss of her mother, then feeling less than because of her miscarriages. But I do see Gemma's point of her carelessness.
Reckless.
She was just very reckless.
Actually, that did remind me. I did also like the scene with her and the Turkish musician where he was like, mate, you're not cursed. Like, all of these things have happened to me, but I don't think I'm... Do you know the conversation I mean?
Basically the conversation, when he's saying to her, that's the viewpoint of medieval Europe, basically, where your Christian medieval European views are this. But where I'm from, we think about the body and herbs and treatment and medicine, and this isn't seen in this way. She's like, oh, that's blasphemy, and he's like, and that's that viewpoint, but that's not the viewpoint everywhere. Like, it's, you know, really interesting actually, because at that time, you know, in the Middle East, the sort of like the that's where the sort of beacon of like medicine and learning was, right? Where he's from, the Ottoman Empire and the Middle East and stuff. So, you know,
would that have been Muslim?
The Ottoman Empire, I think so at that point, wasn't it? I think so. The Ottoman Empire, would it be?
So that was such an interesting conversation between the two of them. I really, really like that.
It really was. And I think that I don't think she'd ever really considered before that there was that other point of view. Like, society was very much reinforcing her feelings that she was cursed and that like everything about her was wrong. But I was glad for her that she did get his point of view on it.
It was really, and also it kind of gelled in with what's going on. So all of these women are experiencing this, and not just the women either, because of course we've got Frederick's story, and he's gay and he's having a relationship with another man, and then you've got Netha and Ida, and they're sort of, all of these people being told that they are doomed, they're cursed, they're blasphemous, like they're against the natural order of things, and like they're all being given these messages, so that they're sort of they're not conforming to the status quo, what the church says is right. So you've got a lot of people within this book who are, you know, like Lisbeth herself, just being told that they're not fulfilling what they should be doing. They're not, you know, they're blasphemous, they're cursed, they're this, they're that. So
And about this again, I think Zach saying, I interpreted it as her feeling like being confined and controlled was what was keeping the babies from growing, and the freedom and controlling her own life.
Interesting.
And Lynn was late because she got lost in the tennis.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
But and also a comment about Ida's death. So tragic. And thought that Ida and Agnetha were also careless. They really were as well. They
were reckless.
And you can see why, because they have obviously been kept apart from each other for so many years, and they were quite sort of desperate by that point, I guess. But they were, you know, they were reckless as well. They should have caused later to have an unfortunate accident.
I mean, you know, Ida is making all his food, and you know, she is they're really in a position to do something. But I think the when they were caught, I think that what they were like, they're out in the open, they're caught, and I just what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
But I did think that theirs was more believable recklessness.
Yes, because they're getting carried away with their feelings for each other.
And they're two lovers, they haven't seen each other for 7 years. Or, you know, I could believe that they would lose themselves.
And also, it kind of tied in with their previous behaviour. Like, if your problem with Lisbeth was that she wasn't like that at the beginning and she had a big about turn in her character, then like they had always consistently risked everything to be together, basically.
Hey, Harry. It's Harry.
Yeah, Harry's turned up. Say hi.
Hi, Harry.
Hi, Harry.
Look at his little face. Oh,
he's turned up. But social issues we've got onto, but anything else you feel we haven't mentioned within the many social issues that Kiran Millwood Hargrave is covering in this book? I felt she did. Like we've said, maybe she was doing too much, but I feel like she did a lot in this book with a lot of different social issues, both of the historical time period and like parallels with now. And I think in her author's note as well, she said about she sort of compared that mania period in that time period with the pandemic. I don't know if you both noticed that, but she sort of said like living through the pandemic through the lens of like pregnancy loss, like influenced her writing about like living through their particular, I guess, epidemic of dancing through Lisbeth's lens of like tragic pregnancy loss. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that the whole I think you can draw the parallels with the pandemic and various social manias and phenomena. I mean, we've got all this kind of like, you know, quite a lot of online conspiracy stuff around the pandemic that's kind of seen as a bit of a mania, right? Like people whipping themselves up into a frenzy over things, and you know, this whole and all of the I think the whole dance phenomena within the book can be kind of almost seen as that a little bit for me. It's kind of like a little bit of a parallel with it, with everyone just being so intense around everything to do with the pandemic. So you can kind of see that. But I think like she did have so much social commentary in this book. It's like so many different things she was commenting on that it's kind of hard to unpick it all. It's all very intertwined, isn't it? You know, so like the patriarchy damages us all, you know, so it's kind of the theme of it, really.
The way she portrayed racism was interesting.
That was interesting.
And you even saw it in Lisbeth at moments.
Also her privilege, like her when she basically, when he's like, leave it, when this guy starts on him, and he's right, because what's going to happen is I'm going to be the one beaten up here, not you. And she just like, she doesn't listen to him and just shoves this guy, and they turn around to come for him. And it's like, kind of like, you don't understand the danger you're putting this man in, because you can't see, you don't see this danger because it's not related to you. So it's interesting.
It was a nice little piece on how not to be an ally. Like you say, like you need to understand your privilege and understand where the boundaries of that are. I thought that was really well written in.
It was definitely.
So yeah, I don't know if anybody else in the comments wanted to say anything else about any of the other things we've mentioned. Julie has popped in. Hi, Julie. And Kat saying hi to Harry. But yeah, so back onto the social. No, Kat felt like the dance tree is a story of strong female connections and abiding love. Agree. Although Ida dies, the women who are left, Lisbeth, Agnetha and Sophie, have changed by the end and support one another.
Yeah. Definitely, because this is it, like those strong female connections and that sense of sisterhood within her writing. I think I get a lot from that from her writing, like those connections. And I love the end of it and the way that their relationship has changed. I think that's a really good point.
And that was one of the things I really, really enjoyed, like that. It's just seeing that forming bond between those three women at the end, particularly between Lisbeth and Neitha. But it was mentioned that Sophie was sort of mellowed out and more friendly to her.
But she also saw Sophie differently, didn't she, as well? Like she's kind of, because again, she was seeing her certain things that she was doing as, derogatory or whatever, but actually some of it is, this is how this woman expresses concern or worry. Like, so she starts to see things a little bit from her point of view as well.
Yeah. So Zach didn't like how she was so forgiving with the boy and he kept stabbing
her in the back.
She wanted to see the best in him and was surprised he betrayed her. Yeah, I did think she was very like, oh yeah, he'll come good, and then he was just constantly like causing trouble.
That wasn't so much of an issue for me because I think I would have been the same. He was a kid living in poverty, and like if she didn't give him a chance, no one was going to give him a chance. And I think maybe that was some of like her mothering instinct coming in. Maybe I don't know, but I just felt really sorry for him because he got in with old knobhead, and she tried to sort of get him out of it, but she couldn't. And
I
it's very difficult for
appreciated
him.
that. I appreciated that we also got like a chapter from him as well, didn't we? So
where he's seeing him, what's his name, being all drunk, and
yeah,
like, hang on, maybe he's not this person I thought he was.
You did realise what a terrible position he was in, that like he could either basically sell everybody out to Plato or just like die in poverty, basically. So he had to choose to betray everybody, which is
Jack, with your history of sort of teaching kids in London for the last however many decades, you must have come across countless kids like that have grown up,
make the wrong decisions,
and you just want to try and help them make a right decision, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, right?
And I think it was really interesting because she sees that he's this desperate child. So when she's not even angry with him, and she gives him some stuff like honey to put on his bee stings and stuff like that. And actually the thing about what we know about people who are who are get into gangs, or people who are groomed, or people who are drawn into extremism or anything like that, the worst thing you can do is be like at them, but one of the worst things you can do is to come down hard, and you're just pushing them into the arms of this other person. And actually and I don't think she sees it that way. She was just like, he's a child, he's in poverty, she knows why he's doing it, and yet it's not it's kind of understanding and kindness, and trying to just show them that you're not going to blame them for their behavior or whatever, I suppose is the kind of way that it's advocated about things like that. And I think it's the same with him, like, because he did in the end, didn't he try and, like, I can't remember the last scene very well, but didn't he try and redeem himself a little bit with the whole like, he was telling everyone that it was the Turkish guy that killed,
not her,
not her, and so he's trying to protect her by doing that. He doesn't understand the relationship she has with him. So to him, he's protecting her by saying that, and he's like, right, everybody, this is what's happened, so we're squits, like me and you, he knows what she's done, he knows it all, but he's not telling.
And it wasn't his ending that he was now working on the farm with her husband?
I can't remember.
I think so.
I believe he was like.
It was only 2 days ago I finished it.
He was helping him replant the farm, wasn't he? Because they were going into planting rather than, now they didn't have the bees. And I'm sure he was helping him do that at the end.
I have no recollection, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
No. So Kat said the dance mania made the patriarchy afraid, and they should be afraid.
They should.
And strong sisterhood could make changes for them and women overall. Zach says sorry for the weird typo. Right. No worries. And Emma, hi Emma, says, hi all, I was wondering about what you thought of how the city of Strasbourg was not really described. I had the feeling it could be any medieval city. Yeah, I didn't really feel like we had a strong sense of it being that specific place, personally.
No, I suppose aside from like the idea of their sort of political makeup of the 21 or whatever, and the way that was all run, aside from that, no, I agree. It kind of, it could have been pretty much.
Which is interesting, because I do feel like the book has a very strong sense of setting. Like, I really felt like I knew the farm in my own picture, in my head. And like the forest with the dance tree, like the dance tree was almost like a setting and a character in itself, wasn't it? It was like a really big presence in the story. You could see why it was the title of the story. And even by the end, like, it's this place that just she and Neitha know about by the end and go off to.
It's a sanctuary, isn't it? It's sanctuary.
Yeah. So I did feel like there was a really strong sense of place in the book, but not of the place Strasbourg.
Agree.
And Kat thinks Sophie changed when Ida died, and she saw how devastated Agnetha was afterwards. Potentially. And they obviously didn't know back then, but aren't pregnant women supposed to stay away from honey? Are they? I know you're not supposed to
unpasteurized
very
honey.
small children.
Oh yeah, small children aren't supposed to have it, I don't think. But honestly, the rules change on pretty much a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like what I could eat with Sam was different to what I could eat with Charlie. So I can't even remember.
And Mary agrees that was the little boy called Daniel?
Daniel.
Yeah, Mary agrees with that ending.
I'm glad Mary was paying attention.
And Kat says hi to Mary. And Mary, you're very late, Mary, but we don't mind. Not to worry. And yeah, okay. Emma agrees.
Oh, so, good. Yeah. Glad other people remembered. Yes, it could have been.
So yeah, we've already talked about the things that I have other titles for, like the bees, the writing, the ending. Anything else either of you two want to say about the dance tree?
I think when you were saying about sense of place and sense of setting and sense of thing, I really feel her writing brings the whole thing to life. Like I really felt, because she's very sensory in her writing, you notice, to the point where some points I was like, oh, a bit disgusted, because some of the smells she's talking about and some of the things, she's really good at bringing you into a scene, I felt. So, but to the point, like I said, the reason I noticed it so much is because I'd be occasionally going, woo, because of some of the medieval stenches around, you know. Yes. So I felt like that was a real strength in her writing, is she brings you into a scene big time.
Yeah, agree.
And the only other thing I was going to pop up, only because I found this banner from last time, I was like, does anybody else have any other recommendations based on the dance tree? I don't have one, because I thought this book was very, very different.
I think Hamnet. I would say Hamnet if people haven't read it yet. Hamnet.
Yeah.
The reason I say it's not because it's necessarily I don't think it has that mirrors, but the initial thought that I had when I first opened it was like, beautiful writing, a really sense of place. I mean, Hamlet's a very different book, but like this strong women and like women who are different, kind of being persecuted a bit by men, and that kind of theme. I think that, and I definitely would recommend The Mercies if you've not read it. But it is a gut punch to this, to the start, like the cruelty to these women is horrific. But there's also some beautiful moments in it, and I think it's a great book. I thought The Mercies was really good. So yes, that's what I'd recommend.
Cool. So yeah, I think I definitely see the connection to Hamnet, and I think if you liked Lisbeth, you would like Agnes even more, in my opinion. I liked Hamnet much more than I liked this book, but that isn't to say I didn't like this book, because I did. Just like, it wasn't a favourite, but I thought it was a really strong book.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I am on it, Alice. And also there's so much to talk about within it.
I feel like we've this has probably been our longest discussion so far, and I feel like there's so many more things we probably haven't touched on. But
there's a few things in the comments.
So in the Middle Ages, very few people travelled far, so they would just take their nearest city for granted. They'd have nothing to compare it to except their village or countryside.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, true. You ladies won't believe.
Oh my gosh!
Morrison after the dance tree, 2 heavy books back to back.
You must have been crying your eyes out. The Beloved is just. I
haven't read that yet.
Oh my! Oh, it's amazing. But how do you think Liz learning to accept gay people was handled?
Good question.
It's interesting because actually, does she end up accepting them and their relationship, or does it just because she loves them as people so much that she ends up sticking up for them? Because actually, it in the beginning, I don't think she was. I mean, she's really shocked by it, isn't she? Because I don't think
she's naive.
She's naive,
very naive.
And she knows that it's like seen by the church as blasphemy, right?
And I think we've got to remember that at this time, what was seen by the church as something, everybody would have
believed it. Yeah,
believed that
it's
the
the
church
gospel
was
truth.
Everything in this society.
I found it. I don't know if she's in her acceptance of them, but I think Erin helped her accept.
Yeah.
A bit, didn't he? Because because of what's gone on between her and him, and the way that he spoke to her about different ways of thinking, and that you know, like he was, you know, he had a friend who's gay, and it's like, so this kind of acceptance, it was kind of quite quick for someone of that era, I think, to come around to that way of thinking. But I think I'm not sure whether she accepted it fully or if it was because she loved the people that.
I agree. I think especially with the Neitha and Ida relationship, she really loved Ida already, didn't she? And she was getting to really like Neitha, so she was like coming at it from the perspective of she really loved them anyway and accepted them in that way. But I agree with you. I'm not sure how far she accepted like the whole entire gay community or anything. But I think she, as you said, understood more from talking to Erin.
I don't think she really understood what it entailed until she caught them in the forest.
Yeah.
I think that was the moment when she realised that, you know, this isn't just a friendship. Yeah, it was an interesting one. Interesting.
So I think we've got a couple more comments and then we will wrap up for today. Julie's saying, not really read much of this author. I think, Julie, you would probably really like
the middle
grade stuff.
Yeah,
Julia and the Shark, absolutely brilliant. Even though you're warning me, Jack, I want to check out The Mercies. I like Hargrave's writing.
I think you'll like it.
I'll read something light and fluffy afterwards. I
think given that you've read Beloved as well, like I think it is. I think Beloved is like here in terms of the shocking. It's on another level. Yeah.
And Paris, Texas is recommending The Red Tent for Fit.
I've heard a lot about The Red Tent.
I haven't actually heard of it.
Isn't that it's about a Bible story? Is it not Samson and Delilah? No, wait. I can't remember who it is, but I've heard a lot about like people recommending this book.
Yeah, I really want. Maybe it's one that we need to add to our potentials for next year's paper.
I think Elizabeth accepts it because she loves Ida, and again, she feels she is also an outcast.
Yeah. It's about the Book of Genesis. So basically, it's a story about ancient womanhood.
Sounds good to me.
There you go.
And Paris, Texas saying, I guess that is what bothered me about the book. Some concepts were so modern, I did not find it believable. I didn't see the themes working in the setting. It felt forced.
I think it's fair enough to say, actually, that a medieval woman would not have necessarily have accepted that as quickly as Lisbeth did. You know, I think it's probably fair to say that there's some like modern poetic license going on there, isn't there? Really, so
agree.
So Mary's saying The Red Tent is where women go when they're having their period.
I now want to read it even more.
Can I, if I could just lie around with some chocolate and a book in the Red Tent, then I'd the Red Tent, please. Sorry. That's probably a poor taste joke, but yeah.
We'll have to send you one for your birthday, Jack.
What's Jack on her birthday? We sent her a red tent. She's sitting up in bed in her red tent. Like a hot water bowl.
Jack's hiding in her red tent again. So our next book is The Song of Achilles. I failed to bring my copy down, but I've got the same copy.
I mean, I found it amongst all these boxes.
Oh, you did well.
Books.
You did well.
Good finding. I say my copy. It's actually my mum's copy. When I showed it in my TBR, she was like, "Oh, my book! I've been reading that for ages." I've had it a very long time. So
I'm really looking forward to it. Actually, I kind of want to get started on it, but I'm going to leave it.
So Jack, you've read it before.
Yeah.
And Jem, you haven't. I haven't read it before either. Cannot wait.
I've read the Iliad. Does that count?
Well, no, you know what? Though I think it does help. I think the thing is, I think it's like because you're very, very familiar with this Iliad and the story of the Trojan War, and I think that really does kind of help with when you're reading any retellings. I think it does kind of help, because one thing I keep seeing is people reviewing various like myth retellings and going, there's so many characters, and there are a lot of characters in these, but I don't know. But it's like this kind of, if you're familiar with the myth, sometimes it makes it.
I think it helps if it's a good retelling.
Yeah.
But if it's just a standard retelling and you already know the original story, you're like, well, you've just retold the same story. You haven't.
Actually, what I would say about this is, from my memory of it, because I read it, gosh, I don't know, it's more than 5 years ago. So I'm really looking forward to a reread of it, because I whizzed through it. And I remember I just couldn't put it down. I whizzed through it and I loved it, but I didn't take enough time to. So I'm really looking forward to getting back into it. But from what I remember, this is not the tale that anyone knows, because it's about Achilles.
That's what you want, though, isn't it?
It's their.
You want that different spin on it, don't you?
Yeah,
on a good retelling. But yeah, we will see how it is. I'm very excited for it. I think this is probably my most FOMO book.
Yes, I think I would agree.
Interestingly, because I actually, out of the 6 books we've chosen, and I mean, because I've read this, it's not my most FOMO book, but I am really excited to read it again. But I can see this would be a lot of people's top book. I think we might get a lot of people join us for this, because I think it's a lot of people, even if people have already read it. I think Katie from Books and Things is going to join us for it,
Oh, really? It's definitely a book that I really, really feel like I had missed out on.
Yes, it's one. It is, and because I never read Circe, you see, and I think I've got Circe. It's been on my TBR for years and years and years, and people love it. But I don't know how much.
I haven't read that either. So
it's really good. Again, it takes obviously the Odyssey in this case, and it just takes a completely different perspective on it. It's just, and I read that before I'd read the Odyssey.
And again, beautiful writing. Beautiful writing. This is
beautiful. She's a master.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. So that's our book for July and August. So hopefully we'll be finished it by the end of August and have a live show on Gemma's channel, I think.
Yes.
Can't point in the right direction still.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. So I think a few people join in us for it in the comments. Kat and Paris, Texas.
Ooh, what I would say as well is, if you know nothing about the mythology behind it, I think you'll still enjoy this. In fact, even more so with this, because this is just kind of like a really good love story. Like it's
cool. And Kat's saying we've chosen some awesome books for FOMO, although she hasn't read The Capture the Castle yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Emma's going to be joining us for Song of Achilles.
Yay.
Emma's got Circe too, but we'll start with Achilles.
Same. I might, The other thing I was going to say is we've got to do next year's FOMO pick.
We have.
Because the last book is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. And that's for September, October. Because it was kind of felt it would be kind of a bit like turning, Halloween-y, a bit gothic.
Yeah.
I feel like it was about this time last year that we did
it. Was. I tell you why I know it was, because it was report writing time, and I was supposed to be like, I kept getting put off work because I was so bored writing reports, and I was like, oh well, I've got a few things to do. Well, let's just make a big list of books. Like we spent like a day doing it, didn't we?
We did.
Great.
We did.
Oh, it was so fun.
So yes, hoping that lots of you will join us in reading that in July and August, and we'll see you over on Gem's channel towards the end of August.
Very excited.
All the talk of Achilles.
Yeah,
excited.
Achilles. But thanks for coming, everyone, today, and thanks for joining in the comments with all the discussion. And we'll speak to you again soon.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.